Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Long Hill Report. I'm Richard Morco, and with us today is Greg Downie, student at Bay Path Regional Vocational High School, a very articulate and knowledgeable young man, and we're very glad to have him here talking about his life as a student, as a person, and a person interested in the world. He's quite a worldview. So, welcome, Gregory.
Thank you for having me.
And it's a pleasure. You can start by going over some of what we had spoken before. You are from a family that came from two places.
Yeah.
A father from Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, and a mother from Romania.
Yep.
And Beaver Falls, not a horrible place or a very interesting place, but I don't know if you've ever heard of the Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. I mean, interesting times are usually with this war and pillage and plunder.
Yeah.
Well, Romania, where your mother grew up, had some difficulties for quite a while because it had a country, head of state, who was a hardcore communist.
Yes.
And so we're going to let Gregory talk about how it was for his mother growing up. She grew up at the late stage of the communist regime. And what was it like?
Yeah. So I was born in Romania, in Bucharest, Romania, and I moved here when I was about 9 years old. So I definitely have seen, the remains of communism, and I've, noticed things and I've learned things. My mom has told me tons of things about her life in Romania during the end stages of communism. And she had tons of stories, and pretty much her life, up until communism came to crumble in about the 1980s, I would say 1983, 1984. She was in a university at that time, and she told us stories about how all the time, the water, electricity, it would just cut out. At around 6 o'clock, it would just cut out, and everywhere. Every single person, every single household, every single apartment, all the water would just cut out, all the light, electricity. And that was because Ceaușescu, who was the dictator at that time, he was under tons of pressure because he took out numerous loans and he owed tons of money to a lot of the other surrounding European countries due to multiple things, and he just owed a lot of money, so he had to do budget cuts. So one of those budget cuts were, taking down the electricity and shutting off the water at a certain time. And my mom, had to deal with that. They had to use candle. She had to, she was on the ground, on the floor, studying for her tests with candlelight. And Romania, too, at that time was the school system was very, very. It was nuts. It was crazy, and I actually took part of that because even in my, small studies in Romania up until the third grade, I was learning advanced math, like about I would say high school math in the third grade in Romania. I obviously have forgotten a lot of it because there was a transition period where I went from Romanian schools to American schools. And a lot of that, I didn't have a lot of practice with it. So I lost a lot of the math, but Romania was very focused on math and science. They didn't really care a lot about like history and things like that because honestly, that's what, communists tend to do. They like to destroy history so they can, make their own and brainwash people. So she was very good at math. She was at the top of her class because that's all she did was study. And that's kind of like all Romania was, a lot of the people in Romania, all they had to do was study. And they would study their whole entire lives just to be able to make enough so they have, like a 2-room apartment. So, communism was definitely horrible, and she had to suffer through a lot. And we're just talking about how kind of like the world realized, what was going on when Ceaușescu was, murdered. And he was murdered for a just cause. But
Well,
yeah,
he was murdered because he had to go.
yeah,
I mean,
his time
he'd outlived his
time
usefulness.
was
He'd outlived his usefulness.
yeah, and a lot of people, even though they despised Ceaușescu, and obviously my mom despised him, tons of Romanian people despised him, most of them, probably like 99.9% of them did, but they still, had a little bit of, not guilt, but kind of, they felt sorry in a way for him, because out of all of the Romanian dictators, he was probably one of the best, and that was because, the time was ending for communism in Romania. And he was, taken out back and without pretty much any trial. And he was, killed. His wife was killed. And out of all the communist leaders, he was one of the leaders, to kind of try to do his own thing. And I think a lot of Romanians respected that. But at the same time, he was still a communist. So, yeah.
Do you know about the recent elections in Romania?
Yeah, so funny you say that, because my mom is actually, she's very, very good friends with Călin Georgescu's wife. And that was the man of it, Călin Georgescu, who was, going to get voted in as president. And I have tons of information about, how that was, potentially a fraud. And tons of Romanian people were for Călin Georgescu because he's a conservative Christian man who, has values and wants to bring, freedom back to Romania. And tons of people.
He was the one they tried to keep from being elected.
Yeah. It was very, very, very recent.
It's very interesting because the EU screams democracy.
Yeah.
But they were suppressing democracy.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And my mom actually, she's still in contact with Călin Georgescu's wife. Like she has her phone number. She can call her up whenever she wants. She's very good friends with her, and she has talked with her plenty of times about what's happening. And it's nuts. It's really nuts because kind of like the same thing that happened here in the U.S. was happening over there. And there's nobody that has been accounted for on kind of like silencing what he has to say and just absolutely rigging, the election in Romania.
Well, just one little aside here. Anybody in the Georgescu family who wants to come in the Long Hill Report, we'll have them on to talk.
Yeah.
We'll love to talk Romanian politics with you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, yeah.
I don't expect to hear from them too soon.
Yeah.
But you let them know. You let them know.
Yeah.
Now, your father was not from Romania.
No.
And it's radically different upbringing.
Yeah, very different. My dad was born in Beaver Falls in 71, the same year as my mom was born. And obviously, for him, life was completely different than my mom's, So, he had a Christian upbringing. He was a Reformed Presbyterian. That's what my grandfather was, and that's when my grandfather died, a Reformed Presbyterian. But my dad, from a young age wanted to, find the truth. My dad loved, learning, reading, getting knowledge, things like that. So he wasn't really interested with getting a career, and that's what he kind of regrets. He tells me all the time, he tries to get me to kind of have a plan, and I personally have a plan. But he was more interested with, finding the truth and learning and kind of like exploring the world. So when he was in college, right after his high school year, he went on a trip with 5 of his friends to kind of explore America. So he had tons of stories about all kinds of things that he saw, nature, mountains, wildlife, things like that are very interesting. But I would say the most interesting thing about his life was, becoming an Orthodox Christian priest. And a lot of people they don't understand how he came from an American Protestant to a Romanian Orthodox priest, and it's two very, very different, almost opposite sides of Christianity, in a way, because the differences between Protestantism and Orthodoxy they're very different.
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he obviously was exploring different sects of Protestantism first. He was looking at, Baptist churches, things like that. And he wasn't really interested in that. And while he was doing all of this, pilgrimage almost, he was reading tons of books. And my grandfather actually had a few books about, the Orthodox Church and written by Orthodox fathers. And my father read them, and he was like, "Dad, what's this Orthodoxy all about?" And my grandfather was kind of like, "Don't worry about it. It's just they're smart men, but they don't know what they're talking about." And he continued to try to find the truth, and then he slowly kind of started fluctuating to the Catholic Church, and then he wasn't actually Catholic. He was never baptized Catholic, but he kind of called himself a Catholic for about a year. But he knew that was something else. He said he was close to, he felt that he was close, but he didn't really find it yet. And he went to a Orthodox church around the area, and he saw everything, and he had a feeling, he had a feeling that this might be it. And then he went to a monastery that was close by, and I've been to that monastery plenty of times. It was in Pennsylvania, and he met a priest there, Father Mark, and he's a very good priest, and he kind of guided him in the direction. So pretty much my dad kind of from there just started reading tons of Orthodox books, and he was like, he started feeling this might really be it. And one of the first ever church services he went to before he went to the monastery was actually Easter service. And in the Easter service, I don't know if you've ever been to an Orthodox Easter service, but we love to say Christ is risen. So they sang that a lot, and he just said this on one of his homilies at church, that when he went there, he walked out because he kept on singing Christ is risen. He's like, these guys are nuts. And he just had to go take a break from that. But obviously he continued in reading about the church, things like that. He went to Mount Athos in Greece, where it was a whole different atmosphere.
It is a very famous place. It's actually a separate country.
Yeah, pretty much. It has its own rules. Women are not allowed on the monastery. There, because of we believe that the Holy Mother is the only, because it's the Holy Mother's monastery, so the only woman that's allowed is the Holy Mother. So that's what we believe in, and people in Greece respect it. It's a very venerable place, and I've never been. I want to go, but my father, he lived there for, I would say, more than 3 years, and he just saw everything that takes place, and it's so much different than the life that we live as everyday day-to-day citizens and things like that. So he did not want to become a monk, which I don't blame him. It's I don't know how they do it, but my father, he learned from that, and then realized that he wants to become Orthodox, so he got baptized there, became Orthodox Christian, got baptized, and then he left. He went to Jerusalem, and while he was in Jerusalem, he met my mother. So they pretty much got married. They went to Romania, got married in Romania, and that's when I came to the world. So yeah.
What year was that?
Yeah,
You were born.
Yeah, I was born 2006.
Ooh, wow.
And he was my father was. I think they got married in 2002. And they were married old. They both got married in their 30s, so they're both very old.
Wait a minute. Whoa, what's that type of talk? Who you calling old?
Yeah, so that's where I came to the world. And I have two younger brothers. They were both born in Romania. My youngest brother, he was born in 2013. We moved here in 2016. So
You have much of a memory of Romania?
yeah, I remember a lot of it actually. I seem to remember a lot of it. As time goes by, I get memories of Romania, and it was very interesting place to live. And I feel like I've almost kind of lived like a double life almost. I feel like sometimes
Speak Romanian?
yeah, I still speak fluent Romanian. I can still read and write in Romanian. Obviously, I have a very strong American accent, but I can still speak fluently.
You don't have any Romanian accent. You're
No.
not completely.
No,
You completely sound American.
yeah.
Very, very interesting. That way, the way you came
Yeah.
over and have two worlds almost.
Yeah.
Now, what is the most salient fact about the Romanian language?
It's a Romance language.
And what is that different from? How is that different from the languages in the area?
That's more like Slavonic.
Slavic.
Slavonic.
The languages in Eastern Europe
Yeah.
are almost all Slavic,
Yeah.
except for this place in the middle of nowhere. But it's not in the middle of nowhere, of
Yeah,
course,
yeah.
but it's out there in the middle, and it's a form. One might say it's a form of Latin.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And just wow, that's out there.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, Romania is a very old country, and you can remember we actually fought against the Romans, the Dacians.
The nations. But
Yeah.
then you became Roman.
Yeah, and that's they were out of all we have. Emperor Caesar. He said that out of all of the countries that he fought, he took over, Dacia was the most, kind of like the most. They put up the biggest fight, pretty much, out of all of them. And that's kind of like how Romania's always been. Tons of leaders and kings that they were just, they were great leaders. And, Romania was always a Christian country. Obviously not when they were Dacians, they were pagans, but slowly they became Christians and Orthodox Christians. And when the Muslims came to take over Romania, there was tons of kings that just rose to the top and defended Romania from the Muslims and the Muslim takeover that was happening in Greece. The Muslims took over tons of parts of Eastern Europe. So Romania kind of never was really taken over by the Muslims. They were always on even playing fields.
That is famously true.
Yeah, yeah,
You're very knowledgeable. And I know you have an interest in history
yeah.
because you wanted to talk about your interest in patent.
Yeah, yeah. So my dad always, we used to have tons of interesting conversations. And my dad, he taught me how to play chess when I was about 5. So I love playing chess. And he always taught me to read and always find the truth, pretty much, because nowadays it's very hard to find the real truth. So it was easier for him to find the truth back before the internet was around, and even when the internet first came out, it was still pretty easy. Now with all the censorship and everything, it's very hard to really find the truth. And except if you read books, then it gets pretty easy. But my dad recommended me a book. I forgot who the author was, but it was kind of like a book about how George Patton was, assassinated. And this man, I forgot, he was a French man. He served in the Green Berets, and I forgot who the author was. But the whole book kind of talks about Patton's early childhood, and then talks about this man's early childhood. And at the end, it portrays that this man, assassinated Patton, and this is kind of almost kind of like a confession that the author has to say, and he hints that the author is the person who assassinated him. And I wish I should have been a little bit more prepared, but I wish I knew the title of the book. I could get it for you. I read the whole thing, cover to cover, And what I found very, very, very interesting was that before Patton was assassinated, him and Eisenhower were really, really good friends. They're both four-star generals, and America was allied with Russia, Stalin, and then they were also allied with Winston, the England. That was like the big three.
British.
Yeah. So they were obviously occupied with like the Nazis at that time to take them over and destroy that. But they were allied with Stalin, who he was butchering millions of people in Russia, and we kind of like put that on like the back burner and didn't really deal with it. And Patton was like, wait a minute, like, all right, the Nazis, we destroyed them, but like, what do we do about like these guys now? And everybody kind of just, was like, like piped down almost like, well, we'll take care of that later. And Patton didn't like that. So he went on tons of, campaigns and wrote tons of, articles and things about how we should be focused on, the communists. And nobody was really listening to him because, Stalin helped us take down, Hitler and the Nazis. And nobody really wanted to have to deal with another big war. So Patton was very mad. He was trying to get, people on his side. And, nobody really listened to him. And I really think that the U.S. government, they knew about what was going on in Russia, and they just wanted to keep it on a low profile. So the more he spoke, the more threats that he was receiving. And this whole story kind of describes about what happened. And we see that Patton was, the way he was assassinated, he was hit by a car. That's a known fact.
Yeah.
But it explains that this man who assassinated him, he used a weapon that threw shrapnel. And he created this weapon, and it makes, car accidents look like they happened. And they noticed tons of different evidence on Patton's body where he was hit. And the accident itself was really not that, hard. Like he 100% got injuries from it, but the after effects of this man's weapon was really what got him. And he didn't even die. He didn't die until he got to the hospital. He survived for, I think, around a day, 24 hours. He survived after the accident. And in the story, it says that a nurse ended up, putting something in the IV, and he ended up passing away. And then after that, all the talk about the communists just, they just all went away. So I think it's a little bit too coincidental that, he just got assassinated. And that kind of like piggybacks on what a project that I did in, I would say the third grade. No, it was the fourth or fifth grade when I was in the U.S. I went to Trinity Catholic Academy in Southbridge, it's a private Catholic school. Yeah. And I did a report there about JFK and how the assassination was done on the inside. And I did a whole report on it. I still have all the information I took out. It's about this stick of information I took down. And I was really invested in this project, and I did a whole billboard on it. I had pictures and everything. And I had to present it in front of all the teachers. And they all thought it was crazy. Every single one of them were like, I was like 10, I was 11, 10 years old, and they're all, some of them were mean. They're like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Like they kind of just, they didn't want anything to do with it, pretty much. And obviously, as we see now, tons of evidence is coming out that, Lee Harvey Oswald didn't shoot JFK. And a lot of people are seeing that, and like it's pretty obvious, especially with the files that are getting released. And it's very strange to think that me, a 10-year-old, knew that that wasn't true, and a bunch of these grown adults who went to university, they're experts, things like that. They just automatically assume that you're wrong. They don't even want to think about it, and I wish I could tell them 4 years later that, you guys are wrong. So.
Well, has more evidence about Patton come to light? I mean, lots of stuff is coming out about Kennedy.
Yeah, 100%.
But it's more, because, I was a history major.
Yeah.
I wasn't I wasn't the greatest history major, but
Yeah.
I got through, and I consider myself a history nerd.
Yeah.
But one of the, a student of history, I could say, but did you look for a book that made the opposite case about Patton?
I've never read a book, but I've read tons of articles, and obviously you have to get both sides of the spectrum. You have to always read both sides. It doesn't matter how silly you might think something is, you have to always read it. So I've never read a book. I've read small books about kind of like Patton's life that were just, you can just go to a bookshelf and grab. I've read books of those, and it was definitely a different time back then. And I think that the more information we get about JFK, we're going to be getting about Patton too, because JFK was against tons of things that are very prominent now, and that was one of the things that I think that JFK was assassinated for. And one of the things that were very evident to me was I watched the original tape of JFK getting assassinated, like the black and white, the original tape. And you can tell in the tape that he gets first shot in the throat. He's clutching his throat, and then his wife, she's looking at him, seeing if he's okay. She's sitting there, and the second shot comes, and then he cocks his head back. So you can obviously tell something had happened before. He didn't just start coughing, He's not sitting there like coughing. His wife is concerned. It's just obvious that he was shot twice. And the fact that they claimed that Oswald shot him from, I think it's 1.6 miles away, something like that.
I think it was it 1.6?
It could have been something around there. They say around a mile or a little bit less than a mile. They claimed that he was shot once, and then the bullet bounced around, the magic bullet. That's what everybody said. It was the magic bullet, because it didn't make any sense how up front the person who was sitting in the passenger seat up front, he was also hit. The governor, one of the governors at the time. He was also hit. So how come the bullet hit JFK twice, right? Then, ricocheted off, hit the governor, and then also injured the person who was driving it. And, people, if you talk about it's, the bullet, just kind of like bounced around. And that, it just doesn't make any sense. And that's what everybody says. It's not like I'm just pulling this out of like a hat. Like everybody claims it was the magic bullet at the time. That's what they stated it as. But, we see tons of more evidence coming to light as we speak.
Well, certainly, a lot is coming out.
Yeah.
This one thing is, they've sealed all this since the assassination, since the Warren Commission and everything. They've sealed it. Why are you sealing it is a question.
The truth is very important. The truth is very important because, it leads to questions, and it leads to, people that do, bad things, they end up having to pay for the consequences. They don't want that to happen.
Well, you know what Napoleon said about history?
He probably says something on the lines of history is not real unless, we remember it as something else, something like that, right?
He said history is an agreed upon lie.
Yeah.
There was a movie with Burt Lancaster and Christopher Plummer, I think it was, and who was the other actor? Two action actors. And they have to let a guy go. And the aide to Christopher Plummer, who was playing General Burgoyne, famous in the Revolutionary War, he said, but General Burgoyne, what will history say? Burgoyne, like a typical upper-class Brit.
Yeah.
History, my dear boy, will lie.
Yeah.
And as we have come to a half hour, is there a truth you want to tell to the youth of America, or at least the youth of Charlton?
There's tons of truths, but we're going to have to save it for a different time, and I hope I'm going to be able to come back. I have tons of different things that we could talk about. But thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've had Greg Downie, and I'm Richard Borko, and thank you for coming by for the Long Hill Report.